No one expected the world to pause that night. Outside, the rain poured steadily, filling the city with the sound of quiet tapping on window glass. Inside countless living rooms, people sat with their eyes on bright TV screens, waiting for just another celebrity interview to begin. Most viewers were tired, looking for distraction, unaware that they were about to see something real, something they would remember long after the credits rolled out in the studio. Bright lights cast soft shadows. Across the stage, Keanu Reeves sat quietly in his chair, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes distant. He wore a simple jacket and faded jeans, blending into the background. Even so, something about him was different tonight. There was a weight in the way he moved, a tension just under the surface, as if he was carrying a secret too heavy to speak. Maria, the show's host, was famous for her sharp questions and warm smile. She greeted Keanu, her words gentle, trying to set him at ease. At first, everything followed the usual path. She asked about his latest movie, his passion for motorcycles, and stories from his youth. Keanu answered politely, smiling sometimes. But his eyes kept drifting toward the floor, as if he was somewhere else in his mind. The atmosphere in the studio shifted slowly. The audience, both in the room and at home, leaned forward, sensing the change. Maria noticed it too. She glanced at her cards, then set them aside. "Keanu," she said quietly, her voice lower than before, "people know you for your roles and your kindness. But I want to ask about something different. A while ago, you visited the Vatican. Some say you met Pope Francis privately. Is there something you've never told anyone about that meeting?" The question hung in the air like a challenge and an invitation. Keanu did not answer right away. He breathed in deeply, his fingers fidgeting with the ring on his hand. For a moment, he looked lost in thought, searching inside himself for the right words. The silence stretched. A producer behind the camera made a small gesture, worried the moment might become awkward. But Maria waited. She knew sometimes silence was the only path to truth. Finally, Keanu spoke, his voice softer than the rain outside. "I was not planning to talk about this. I never have before. But maybe, tonight, someone needs to hear it." He paused again, his eyes shining with a mix of sadness and hope. The crew, usually busy adjusting cameras and lights, stopped what they were doing. Even Maria forgot her script. The moment felt delicate, like a bird about to take flight. Keanu continued. "Back then, I was in a bad place. I had lost someone I loved more than anything. I felt empty, like I was floating through days without a reason to wake up. Work felt meaningless. Fame didn't matter. Nothing did." As he spoke, the room grew stiller. You could hear only his voice and the quiet hum of the lights. "I traveled to Rome because I was desperate. I needed to find something, maybe hope, maybe forgiveness. I didn't even know what I was searching for. I just wanted the pain to stop." He smiled sadly, looking up at Maria. "I was given a short meeting with Pope Francis. I expected formality and old rituals. But he welcomed me with simple kindness. No bodyguards, no titles, just a man in white, offering a chair and a warm smile." Keanu's voice trembled. "I tried to explain my pain, but I couldn't find the right words. I just started to cry. I felt embarrassed, but he didn't judge me. He sat beside me, close enough that I could feel his warmth. He took off his ring and placed it on the table. He said, 'Here, I am not the Pope. I am your brother.'" The audience at home could feel their own hearts tighten. Keanu described how, in that quiet room, they shared a silence so deep it seemed to heal something inside him. "We didn't talk about religion or faith or power. We just sat, and he listened, not with answers, but with presence. It made all the difference." Keanu looked down at his hands, remembering every detail. After a long time, he finally spoke. He told me, "Pain does not mean you are weak. Pain means you are alive." Sometimes the only thing you can do is let someone sit with you in the darkness until the morning comes. A tear slid down Keanu's face as he recalled the moment. Before I left, he hugged me. He whispered, "Carry your pain with kindness. Let it teach you how to care for others." I walked out of that room lighter, as if someone had shared my burden. In the studio, no one made a sound. The truth in Keanu's words was like a gentle wave, washing over everyone watching. Maria, usually so strong and composed, wiped a tear from her eye. Keanu finished quietly, "I have never told that story before. Not to protect the Pope's privacy, but because I was afraid people would not understand. But tonight, maybe someone at home needs to know they are not alone. Pain is not the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of a new one." The camera lingered on Keanu's face as he breathed out slowly. His pain transformed into something that felt almost like hope. Viewers everywhere sat still, feeling a strange sense of comfort from a man who had just shown them his most private wound. Outside, the rain continued, but inside that studio, a new sense of peace had quietly arrived. The world felt just a little more human, a little more kind. The days that followed the broadcast moved slowly, as if the whole city was waiting for something to happen. Everywhere Keanu went, strangers stopped him on the street. Some offered gentle smiles, some asked for hugs, and a few simply stood in silence, not knowing what to say. But it was the messages, the quiet letters and trembling voices on the phone that began to shift. Something deep inside Keanu's heart. People from all over the world reached out to share their stories. A mother in Brazil who had lost her son wrote about how she sat in the dark every night, holding his favorite toy, listening to the rain. An old soldier from Poland described nights so lonely he thought even the stars had forgotten him. A child from a small village in Africa sent a drawing of two stick figures, one sitting beside the other, with the words, "Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone." Keanu read every message. Sometimes he cried, sometimes he smiled. More than once, he sat up in bed at night, holding the letters to his chest, letting their words remind him of the strange, invisible threads that connected all people, no matter how far apart their lives might seem. The pain he had felt so sharp and private just days before now felt softer, changed by the knowledge that it was shared by so many. But not everyone was kind. There were voices in the media, whispers online, questioning his honesty. Some headlines called his story a publicity stunt. Others accused him of disrespecting the church. For the first time since the broadcast, doubt began to creep back into Keanu's heart. He wondered if he had done the right thing. Maybe he had shared too much, exposed a piece of himself the world was not ready to see. The city itself felt different, both colder and more alive. The rain still fell, but sometimes the sun broke through for just a moment, casting golden light across the pavement. Keanu began to walk the streets in the early mornings, hoping the movement would quiet his mind. The faces he passed were full of their own secrets, their own burdens. He found himself noticing little things, a woman crying softly in a cafe, a child laughing as he jumped in puddles, a street musician playing a broken song on a corner. Each moment made Keanu think of that meeting with Pope Francis. He remembered the silence, the warmth of a hand on his shoulder, the simple kindness that had meant more than any speech. He wished he could go back, if only for a minute, to ask more questions, to find more answers. But life, he realized, only moves in one direction. The past is a place you can visit in memory, but never change. One morning, as the city slowly woke up, Keanu visited a small church tucked away on a quiet street. He slipped inside, unnoticed by anyone, and sat in the last pew. The air was cool and smelled of old wood and candle wax. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting colors on the stone floor. For a while, Keanu just sat there, breathing, feeling the weight of everything he had heard and said in the last few days. As he sat in the hush of the empty church, something began to shift inside him. The pain was still there, but now it felt less like a wound and more like a reminder, proof that he had loved, that he had cared. He remembered the Pope's words, "Carry your pain with kindness. Let it teach you how to care for others." Those words seemed to echo through the silence, soft but steady, like the gentle tolling of a bell. He looked around at the empty pews, the flickering candles, the painted faces of saints in the windows. He thought of all the people who had ever come here to pray, to weep, to ask for forgiveness or hope. Each one had carried their own secret burdens, just as he did. In that moment, Keanu realized something simple, but true pain did not have to make you smaller. It could open you up, make you gentler, more willing to listen. As he stood to leave, an old man entered the church, his steps slow and careful. He sat beside Keanu, nodding as if he understood. "Sometimes," the old man whispered, his voice a dry wind, "the only way out of darkness is to hold someone else's hand, even if only for a moment." Keanu smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it felt real. He thanked the old man and stepped back into the sunlight. Something in his heart was lighter. He knew he still had a long journey ahead, but he was no longer afraid of where it might lead. That night, as Keanu sat by his window, watching the city lights blink on one by one, he picked up his phone and called his sister. They had not spoken in years, not since the tragedy that tore their family apart. His hands shook as the phone rang, but when she answered, her voice was warm, surprised, and a little bit hopeful. They talked for hours, sharing memories, laughter, and even a few tears. For the first time, Keanu allowed himself to believe that healing was possible. He did not know what the future would bring, or how the world would remember his story. But for the first time in a long time, he knew that kindness, even in the smallest form, could change everything. The days after reconnecting with his sister seemed to flow both quickly and slowly for Keanu. Each morning brought a new wave of emotions: relief, guilt, hope, and fear, all mixing together like rainwater swirling down a city street. He was grateful for her voice, for the chance to laugh together again, but deep down he knew their past was not easily healed. Old wounds did not disappear just because you wanted them to. They spoke almost every night now, often falling into long silences that were more comforting than words. Sometimes memories would surface, some happy, some so painful they made Keanu's chest tighten. There was the summer they spent at the lake, skipping stones and chasing fireflies, but also the cold winter morning when everything changed, when tragedy broke their family into pieces too sharp to touch. He wondered if the pain would always be there, just under the skin. One evening, his sister said quietly, "I watched your interview, you know." Her voice was gentle, but there was a tremble in it. "It made me think about Dad, and about what we lost." Keanu closed his eyes, feeling tears prickle. "I never wanted to hurt you," he whispered. I couldn't handle it. I was angry, and I ran away instead of staying." "I'm sorry." There was a pause. He heard her breathing, slow and steady, before she answered. "We both ran. In our own ways, but maybe it's time we come home. Maybe it's time we let go, just a little." Those words echoed inside him all night. For so long, Keanu had carried the weight of his own mistakes, believing that forgiveness was something he didn't deserve. But as dawn crept in through the curtains, he realized forgiveness was not about deserving. It was about letting go of pain before it grew too heavy to carry. Meanwhile, the world outside kept changing. News channels replayed clips from his interview, and social media was filled with debates. Some people called him brave. Others called him foolish. A few insisted he had disrespected the Pope, twisting his story into something ugly and loud. Keanu tried not to read the comments, but sometimes the words found him anyway, stinging like small cuts. The pressure mounted day by day. Friends reached out to support him, but he still felt alone, as if standing in the eye of a storm. One afternoon, his manager called and said, "There's talk of you visiting Rome again. People want a follow-up, but I think you need to do what feels right for you." The thought of returning to Rome filled Keanu with dread and longing, equal measure. The city held memories of pain and healing, of secrets whispered in the quiet, of a chapel. After days of restless sleep, he decided to go not for the cameras, but for himself. He wanted to lay his burdens down where they began. As the plane descended over the ancient city, Keanu pressed his forehead to the window, watching the golden rooftops and winding streets. He remembered walking those roads, heart heavy with grief. This time, he hoped, would be different. He arrived quietly, avoiding reporters and cameras, and made his way to the small guest house where he had stayed before. The city felt different now, warmer, gentler, as if the sunlight itself remembered him. He wandered the streets at dusk, letting his thoughts settle like dust. The sounds of distant bells mixed with the laughter of children, and for a moment, he felt almost at peace. Early the next morning, he returned to the Vatican, heart pounding in his chest. The guards recognized him, offering polite nods and quiet smiles. He was led to a simple garden where Pope Francis often walked in the early hours. As Keanu waited, he noticed the flowers, roses, lily, and wild violets, blooming in the soft light. The Pope arrived, not with ceremony or crowds, but alone. He greeted Keanu with a warm hug, his eyes full of kindness. "My friend," he said softly, "what brings you back to Rome?" Keanu tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. "I came because I needed to thank you, and to ask you something. How do you forgive when it feels impossible?" The Pope listened, folding his hands in his lap. "Forgiveness," he said, "is not something we do once. It is something we choose, again and again, each day. Sometimes it is easy. Sometimes it is the hardest thing in the world, but it is the only way to let the heart heal." Keanu felt tears rise again, not from sadness, but from the slow relief of understanding. "I want to forgive myself," he said, "for the things I did and the things I couldn't do." The Pope smiled. "Then begin now. Each day, let your heart be a little lighter. Carry your pain with you, but do not let it weigh you down. And remember, you are not alone." They sat together in the garden, listening to birds and the distant sound of the city waking up. Keanu felt something shift inside him, a loosening of the old, tight knots of grief and shame. Maybe, he thought, forgiveness was not a single act, but a practice, a way of living. When he left the garden, the city felt different. Colors seemed brighter, the air clearer. He spent the day walking, noticing beauty in places he had missed before. Children played soccer in the streets, old men argued over chess, women laughed together outside cafes. Life, he realized, was full of pain and joy, woven together so tightly you could not separate them. That night, Keanu called his sister again. His voice was steadier this time. "I went back," he told her, "and I found some peace. I want to come home if you'll have me." She cried then, happy tears, and he cried too. It was the first time in years he felt truly free, yet even. As his heart began to heal, new challenges waited just ahead, reminders that forgiveness, kindness, and resilience are tested not once, but many times. In ways you cannot predict. The world seemed quieter when Keanu returned from Rome. But inside his mind, a new storm had begun to gather. With every step through the city's familiar streets, he carried the lessons he had learned like fragile treasures. Forgiveness was not a key that unlocked every door at once. It was a candle he had to relight every morning, sometimes with trembling hands. His days felt lighter, yet he knew shadows were always near, shadows made from fear, regret, and the doubts that come when you try to live a kinder life. Keanu started to see life's small moments differently. He made time for slow walks, stopping to listen to street performers, to talk with strangers, to let himself be part of the world instead of hiding from it. He smiled at old women carrying groceries, let children pet his dog, and offered his seat on the subway to tired workers. Kindness, he realized, was not about grand gestures. It was about noticing the people around you, meeting their eyes, and saying with your presence, "I see you, and you matter." But the world does not always reward kindness. One afternoon, as Keanu sat quietly in a park, enjoying the sun and the laughter of children, his phone buzzed with a message from his manager. There was trouble brewing, not in his private life, but in the world outside, a world that demanded more from him than he ever expected. A powerful storm had swept through a small town on the coast, flooding homes and leaving hundreds without shelter. Images of broken houses, crying children, and desperate families filled the news. His manager's message was simple: people are asking for help. Would you consider using your voice to raise awareness? Keanu stared at his phone, feeling a familiar weight press on his chest. He knew what it meant to lose everything in an instant. He remembered the helplessness he had felt after his own loss, the nights when hope seemed too far away to touch. It would be easy to post a message online, to donate quietly and move on. But the lessons from Rome echoed in his mind. Carry your pain with kindness. Let it teach you how to care for others. He decided to do more than speak. He traveled to the flooded town, his arrival quiet and unannounced. He wore no disguise, just a simple jacket and worn shoes. When people recognized him, some stared in disbelief, others smiled through their tears. Keanu did not come as a celebrity. He came as a fellow human, ready to help however he could. The devastation was everywhere. Streets lined with mud, houses shattered by water, people huddled under makeshift tents. Keanu walked through the ruins, listening to stories, holding hands, sitting beside those who had lost everything. He spent long hours stacking sandbags, passing out food, and helping rebuild what little could be saved. At night, he slept in the same shelters as the other volunteers, his heart heavy but his spirit determined. One evening, after a long day of work, Keanu sat beside a young boy named Samir. The boy had lost his home and his dog in the storm. His eyes were wide with sadness, and he clung to a faded photograph. Keanu listened as Samir told him about his dog, about their adventures, about how he missed the feeling of safety. Keanu's voice was soft when he replied, "When I was your age, I lost someone I loved too. I thought the pain would never leave. But then I met someone who sat with me in silence and showed me that even the worst days can be survived. You are not alone, Samir. You are stronger than you know." Samir looked up at Keanu, searching his face for truth. Then, quietly, the boy leaned against him, letting himself rest for the first time in days. For a long moment, they simply sat together. The world's noise fading into the background. News of Keanu's actions spread quickly, reaching far beyond the flooded town. Some reporters arrived, eager for a headline, but Keanu refused interviews. He told them, "This is not about me. It's about helping each other when we need it most." The people in the town began to smile more, to hope again, inspired not by fame, but by the quiet strength of someone who chose to stay. Yet not everyone understood. Some critics accused him of using tragedy to polish his image, while others said his efforts were too small to matter. The world's opinions swirled around him, sometimes harsh, sometimes full of praise. But Keanu learned to let go of what he could not control. He focused on the faces in front of him, the hands that needed holding, the stories that deserved to be heard. After a week of long days and restless nights, the floodwaters finally began to recede. The town was far from healed, but hope had returned, carried on the backs of small acts of kindness and the resilience of people determined to rebuild. As Keanu prepared to leave, the townspeople gathered to thank him. Samir handed him the faded photograph of his dog, saying, "For you, so you. Remember us." Keanu took the photograph, his heart full. He knelt down, meeting the boy's eyes. "I will never forget you, Samir. And when you feel alone, remember this: someone, somewhere, is carrying your story with them." On the drive home, Keanu looked out the window at the world passing by. He thought about the Pope's words, about forgiveness and kindness, about how easily hope can be lost and found again. He understood now that the real test of a person's spirit is not in what they say, but in what they do when no one is watching. The days after Keanu left the flooded town passed in a blur of exhaustion and reflection. Even as he returned to his apartment in the city, his mind remained in the ruined streets, with Samir's eyes and the weight of 100 stories pressing on his heart. The faded photograph stayed in his jacket pocket, a reminder that hope was something fragile and precious, something that needed to be carried gently. The world outside had not stopped moving. News reports about the flood began to fade, replaced by fresh headlines. But there was one story that refused to disappear, a story about Keanu's quiet acts of kindness, captured in photographs and whispered in conversations far beyond the town he had helped. People began to talk, not just about the tragedy, but about what it meant to truly care. Messages flooded his phone and email, some from old friends, some from strangers, all sharing how his actions had inspired them to help someone in need. For the first time in a long while, Keanu felt the true meaning of connection, how one person's small act could ripple through the world and spark countless others. But with that attention came new challenges. His manager called one morning, voice tense. "There's been an invitation," she said. "The United Nations is holding a global summit about hope, resilience, and rebuilding communities. They want you to speak. It will be broadcast live to millions." Keanu's heart skipped. It was one thing to sit quietly beside someone in pain. It was another to speak in front of cameras, knowing the whole world was watching. Memories of his first interview with Maria came rushing back, the fear, the trembling hands, the doubt that anyone would care about his truth. He wanted to say no, to return to his quiet life, but then he thought of the boy, of the people he had met, of the voices who had written to thank him. Maybe, just maybe, he could help one more person find hope. The weeks before the summit were filled with anxiety. Keanu found himself reliving old doubts, haunted by fears of not being enough, of saying the wrong thing, of failing when it mattered most. He rehearsed late at night, talking to empty rooms, his words echoing off the walls. He called his sister for advice, and she listened patiently, her voice steady and kind. "Just speak from your heart," she told him. "People want to hear the truth, not a perfect speech." On the morning of the summit, Keanu woke before dawn. He walked the empty streets as the city stretched and yawned awake. At a quiet cafe, he sipped coffee and watched the sky change from black to soft blue. He felt the nerves in his stomach, but also a strange, gentle calm. Whatever happened today, he would carry the lessons of kindness and resilience with him. Summit was held in a vast, bright hall filled with people from every corner of the globe. Cameras lined the walls, and the buzz of excitement mixed with the hum of nervous energy. Backstage, Keanu closed his eyes, remembering the silent garden in Rome, the warmth of Pope Francis' hand, the simple words that had given him courage. He thought of the town he had left, the people rebuilding broken homes, the child clutching a photograph and searching for hope. When his name was called, Keanu stepped onto the stage, heart pounding. The lights were blinding, but as he looked out over the audience, he saw faces, some smiling, some serious, all waiting for something real. He began to speak, his voice soft but steady. "There was a time," he said, "when I thought pain was something to hide. I believed that kindness was weakness, that asking for help meant I had failed. But I learned, from people much stronger than me, that true resilience is not about standing alone. It's about letting others in. It's about listening and showing up and carrying each other's burdens, even when they feel too heavy." He shared the story of the flood, of Samir, of the small moments that made the difference. A gentle word, a helping hand, a moment of silence shared with a stranger. He spoke about his own journey, about forgiveness, about the day in Rome when he learned that even the most broken hearts can be healed by compassion. We live in a world that celebrates strength and success, Keanu continued, his voice growing firmer. But I have found more courage in vulnerability, more hope in the quiet acts of kindness that often go unseen. Every person in this room, every person watching, carries their own pain, but you are not alone. Together, we can build something better, not just with our hands, but with our hearts. As he finished, the room was silent. For a moment, the weight of everything lost, love, hope hung in the air, shared by all who listened. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first, and then rising until the hall echoed with the sound of hands clapping, not for a celebrity, but for the truth he had spoken. After the summit, people lined up to thank Keanu, to share their own stories. He listened to everyone, hugging those who needed it, offering quiet encouragement to those who were afraid. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, he sat by the window, looking out over the city lights. He thought of the long road he had walked, the mistakes and the healing, the times he had wanted to give up but didn't. He realized that the journey was never really finished. Every day would bring new challenges, new chances to choose kindness over fear, hope over despair. And somewhere out there, he knew, someone was carrying a photograph. Someone was watching and listening. Someone was waiting for a reason to believe. The summit left Keanu changed. He felt it in the way strangers now stopped to share a story, in the quiet notes tucked under his door, in the emails and letters that poured in from every part of the world. They spoke of loss and hope, of loneliness and gentle strength, of how a single moment of kindness could mean the difference between giving up and holding on. Everywhere he went, people seemed to carry themselves a little differently, as if the world itself had remembered what it meant to care. But the days that followed were not easy. Life, Keanu learned, does not pause just because you have found a measure of peace. A week after returning home, he received news that shook him to his core. A friend from his past, someone he had lost touch with during the hardest years, had fallen ill and was fighting for his life in a small hospital outside the city. The call came late at night. The voice on the other end was trembling, full of fear and regret. Keanu sat in the dark, listening, the weight of old memories pressing down like a heavy blanket. He had not seen his friend Marcus in nearly a decade. Theirs had been a complicated friendship, full of laughter and arguments, shared dreams, and broken promises. After Keanu's own world fell apart, he had pushed Marcus away, unable to face the reminders of what he had lost. Now in the quiet of his apartment, he realized how much he missed that voice, how much he wished for just one more chance to make things right. Keanu packed a small bag and drove through the night. The city fell away behind him, replaced by open fields and dark trees, the road stretching ahead like a ribbon of possibility. As the sun rose, painting the sky with soft gold and pink, he arrived at the hospital. It was small and quiet, tucked between a line of old oaks and a playground where children's laughter drifted through the open windows. Marcus was weaker than Keanu remembered, but his smile was the same. He reached out, their hands meeting in a quiet, wordless apology. For hours they sat together, talking about nothing and everything, the movies they loved, the music they once played, the plans they never finished. In those simple moments, Keanu felt a different kind of healing, a healing that came not from words, but from presence, from letting someone know you would not leave them alone in the dark. As the days passed, Keanu visited every morning. He brought books, music, and sometimes just silence. Together, they watched the seasons change outside the window, sunlight turning to rain, green to gold. Marcus's illness was a battle he would not win, but there was peace in his eyes, a kind of acceptance that only comes when you know you are loved. One afternoon, as rain tapped gently against the glass, Marcus whispered, "Thank you for coming back. I thought I would die alone." Keanu squeezed his hand, voice thick with emotion. "No one should have to face the end alone. You gave me so much when I needed it most. This is just me trying to give a little back." Marcus smiled, his breathing shallow. "You did more than that. You reminded me that kindness matters, even when it seems too late." When Marcus passed away a few days later, Keanu wept openly. It was a grief unlike any he had known, sharp but not empty. This time, he let the pain move through him, letting it remind him of the love he had shared, the laughter and the tears, the ways they had both tried and failed and tried again. He stayed until the very end, holding his friend's hand, making a silent promise to keep carrying that light forward. After Marcus's funeral, Keanu spent time with the man's family, sharing memories, laughter, and gentle silences. It was there, among the people who had shaped his friend's life, that he felt the true measure of resilience, not in overcoming sorrow, but in choosing to love again. To open your heart even when it hurts. Back in the city, Keanu returned to his quiet routines, but something inside him had shifted. He started volunteering at the hospital, sitting with patients who had no one else. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just listened to music or watched the sun set together. Each day, Keanu remembered the lessons he had learned: forgiveness, kindness, the strength found in vulnerability. News of his volunteer work began to spread, not through headlines or viral videos, but through whispers, through the quiet gratitude of those he helped. People began to send their own stories of hope, of loss, of the simple ways they found courage to go on. Keanu read every one, his heart expanding with each letter, knowing he was part of something much larger than himself. One day, as he walked through the hospital garden, a little girl approached him, her face serious. She handed him a crumpled drawing, a picture of two people holding hands under a bright sun. "My mom says you're a hero," she said, looking up at him with wide eyes. Keanu knelt down, smiling. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who tries to do the right thing, even when it's hard." The girl thought for a moment, then grinned. "That's what heroes do." Keanu laughed softly, feeling the truth in her words. In that moment, he understood that resilience was not about never falling. It was about getting up again, about holding on to hope even when the world seemed darkest. It was about small acts of kindness, shared across years and continents, passed from one person to another like a light that never goes out. As seasons turned and years passed, Keanu became known not just for his movies or his fame, but for his presence, the gentle way he listened, the way he made people feel seen. He mentored others, helped raise money for those in need, and always found time to visit old friends and new ones alike. He carried Marcus's memory with him, a quiet strength in his heart, a reminder that every goodbye was also a beginning. His story inspired many, but he never let the praise become his reason for living. He remembered the words of Pope Francis: the hands he had held, the boy in the flooded town, the friend who forgave him, the child who believed in heroes. Through every challenge, every loss, he chose to keep moving forward, to keep loving, to keep hoping. And in the end, it was not the fame or the headlines that defined him, but the quiet daily choice to live with kindness, to be, in a world full of struggle, a small and steady light.